Welcome to this edition of Weather to Watch. A lot of weather coming up. Just pick what you want to look at for the next week or so. It is March 10th, 2025. Well, I get set to have an active weather week. As you saw in the thumbnail, lots of different hazards coming up, and it's very typical for spring to combine all these together into one really troublemaking storm. Until we get to that, though, warmer weather for most of the country, except it'll get increasingly cooler and wetter in the western U.S. as that storm starts to develop. A few weaker weather systems to look at, one in the southeast that's getting ready to leave, and another one that'll cross the deep south midweek, and everybody's talking about the huge, deep cyclogenesis storm forecast for later in the week, and we'll dive right into that. So having said all that, this is actually a pretty quiet look right here at the satellite loop. You can clearly see the system in the southeastern U.S., a very typical small compact cyclone. You can see the twist in the clouds. This is kind of cool to see that. The visible satellite just makes that so much more obvious. Just high clouds drifting across the northern plains. There is a storm track, but it's in Canada. And for a change, we can start to warm up some of the areas like New England that have just always hung on to the cold air. And although it's quiet in the west now, and you can see various snow cover through many of the mountain chains out here, they're scheduled to get a lot more as the next couple of weather systems come ashore. If we take a look at the 500 millibar flow, that's just the middle of the active weather part of the atmosphere. Not surprisingly, you see an upper level low connected with that system in the southeast. And remember, these X's are little vorticity maxes. They're kind of storm centers. And really, and this, when I overlay this, it overdoes it a little bit. But having said that, they're really, except for that storm, right now at least, not a lot of weather systems to talk about. If I take a look at a colorized version of that, you can certainly see the spin and the shear connected with that storm there. Minor little impulses. The main jet stream flow is through Canada right now, and that is going to change too as that deeper system out west starts to develop. There, I'll change my arrow there. And this right here is going to dislodge and affect people in the southern U.S. before that next big system comes on in. Well, the country is actually fairly quiet, so this is what I like to show you. It's a combined radar report, a composite radar for the U.S., and the little symbols on there are weather reports, storm reports, if you will. So there's really only two areas of active weather. One of them is the wind reports up here in Montana and into the Dakotas. Again, very common with a powerful jet stream that blows over the Rockies. And then we have some severe weather down here, just leaving now the area south of, in the southern half of Florida, basically, including, looks like a tornado report. We'll investigate that. Is that the one that hit the TV station that I thought I saw on the internet today? I think it is, actually. Yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, let me zoom in on, let's go to Florida first here and take a look at that and see if we can get a report on that. Yeah, the Orlando TV station. That's right. I did see that. So if we just click on that, yeah, the Fox 35 Studios. That's right. I did see that go by today. It's very, very interesting. It doesn't happen very often. But the thunderstorm line is pretty much leaving now. It did produce some wind reports there around West Palm Beach. I believe that's a wind report there of 45 mile per hour wind gust, not quite to the severe level. This is a hail report here. I'm sorry, that's a 41 mile per hour wind gust there. And then we had some rain reports if we were to look up in the panhandle from when the weather system moved through. And then we can see the circulation of that low if you just watch the radar spin right there. It's kind of interesting, centered on South Carolina there with some pretty good rain, a couple of embedded thunderstorms. And then again, this isn't precipitation in the northern plains, but these are all high wind reports. There's a little bit of light snow along a front in Montana, in North Dakota, I should say. That's right there. And then the rest of those are just high wind reports. Well, there is that storminess in southern Florida that's left, and there was a slight risk for severe weather down there, which was justified. Now, the next outlook area of concern is Wednesday, so a portion of Arkansas and Texas and a small portion of Louisiana have the lowest risk, a marginal risk of severe weather for Wednesday. And keep in mind that these outlooks, when we say Wednesday, that's Wednesday morning through Thursday morning, but I think most of this will be late in the day on Wednesday and overnight. So a slight risk. And I'd watch this area. This could get an upgrade here before we get to the actual event. It's 2 days out. And then everybody's talking about Friday's outlook. So the way you interpret this avocado, as many people have referred to it as, is the center part is a 30% chance of a severe storm within 25 miles of any given point, and then the outer is a 15% chance. So this is actually fairly significant for the Storm Prediction Center to issue something like this for 5 days out. It means they have a pretty high confidence that something is going to happen. And as I'll review later, there are strong wind fields that suggest severe weather and some moisture. But a lot of times these early systems in March are a little moisture starved, meaning that there's not a chance to really open up the Gulf and get a lot of humidity, dew points, higher dew points flowing in mass up into the storm system. Sometimes it's just a little tiny strip, and we'll discuss that here. The severe weather probability, this is just looking back at previous weather conditions that looked much like this and said, hey, what happened? Well, there was a 30% chance of severe weather down here. So this doesn't always agree with the Storm Prediction Center's outlook. But that's okay because they put other factors into this as well. One of the things I'll talk about in a minute is the fact that sometimes storms go bimodal. And on Friday, you'll notice that if they take a look at tornadoes that have occurred with this type of setup, this one is fairly seasonal and obvious. This one up in Nebraska, though, it shows the dual nature of a storm like this, where you have good dynamics and questionable instability here, and very good instability and maybe not so great dynamics down there. So that kind of explains that. And by the way, so then we go to the next day, and this whole thing kind of sags into Mississippi and Alabama. So the severe weather risk, again, 6 days out to have a 15% area like is outlined here is actually a fairly confident thing, a statement of confidence that that forecast is going to work out accurately. And as I always say, you need to watch these because they do shift around and morph and grow as time goes on. And we are many days out, so it's hard to talk about tornado outbreaks or anything like that. We really don't know that yet, but certainly it is something to watch. All the pieces are kind of there. Well, once this system gets up and cranking, the quantitative precipitation forecast or total rainfall, and this is a 7-day outlook, but much of this, if not all of this, is going to fall later on in the period, beginning Thursday, Friday, Saturday time frame. But if you're looking at these deeper colors here on the left, that's red. That's a 3-inch rain total through parts of the Tennessee River Valley into northern Alabama, and that's, of course, off coast there. And then this stuff up here in Minnesota, this is just liquid. That's probably mostly snow up there, or at least the back end of it is. So all they do is whatever snow falls, this outlook would melt that down to a rain gauge. And when you see higher amounts like that, that's at least suggestive that the snows will be pretty good up there. They're probably talking half foot of snow at least, if not more, in parts of Minnesota. It's still way too far out to tell, but the dynamics and the moisture are definitely there. And there's a West Coast version of this too. So look at all the rain. So this yellow up here that you see kind of sprinkled through some of the higher elevations here, this is getting up to 7, almost 10 inches of, again, QPF. So if you put that into mountain snow, that's feet of snow for those folks. And that is not necessarily at the end of this period. This starts cranking in around Wednesday or so. And there's also some pretty good snows through the higher elevations of Idaho, mountainous areas of Utah and Wyoming, and parts of Montana as well. Well, the term is called cyclogenesis, and if it happens really quickly and the central pressure happens to fall pretty rapidly, it's called a bomb cyclogenesis. And in springtime, these are actually not that unusual. It's a little more exciting to get them in the middle of the country, in the middle of the continent, because a lot of times these are products of the East Coast or in the North Pacific somewhere just off the West Coast. But when they happen in the central U.S., all kinds of trouble gets stirred up. So we'll just take a look at this is the GFS model, and this is isobars and precipitation type. So we can see here today we have that one low that's kind of offshore here, the Carolinas, and that's on its way out. We have another low up here north of Lake Superior. That was the old storm track that's moving through southern Canada and the northern U.S. That system in the southeast is a cutoff low, and so is this right here. So as we go forward here, all these lows will migrate on through, and then we're going to watch the development later in the week of a huge low pressure center over the central Midwest, sort of the northern plains kind of area. So let's kind of take it through here, and I do want to stop right around Wednesday here and take a look at this area here. So there is, as you saw in the severe weather outlook, that's an area where some moisture might creep its way up from the Gulf. By moisture, I mean dew points, fuel for severe storms, instability, that type of thing, moving its way up there. So that might get an upgrade. We'll see how that works out. Meanwhile, high pressure takes control of New England midweek, and we also have this system coming ashore. That's the big one that's going to affect the central U.S., but lots of heavy rains and snows in association with that. So we'll move forward here. Now we're going to go through, this is Thursday. During the day here, a lot of snows in the Rockies and rains in the lower elevations. Then right here is where we see the first signs of that low pressure area developing there in northeastern Colorado. And that's the storm that is going to rapidly intensify. You'll notice that now wind blows toward low pressure, and in the northern hemisphere crosses toward low pressure like this in a counterclockwise fashion. So the wind's going like that. And the closer these isobars are together, the stronger the wind. So this is a pretty breezy condition in an area that's already experienced a lot of wind. And in March, that's actually very typical. But let's move forward here and see what happens. One of the key things to this whole severe weather part of it, the warm part of this storm, is how much moisture is available in the Gulf to move up. So the thing of it is, this low is forming so far to the north that the fetch of wind is not directly off the Gulf. It's kind of coming out of Mexico a little bit, so it's a little bit drier, and it is working on it. But it's and also the previous system kind of knocked that potential down a little bit. But by Friday, Thursday, late here into Friday, this is opening up quite a bit, and so you can see that low deepening over the Kansas-Nebraska border right there. Very strong winds coming in behind this here. This is snow, and it could be blizzard conditions here, because one of the defining factors of blizzard conditions is the wind. So we'll just keep moving forward. This is Friday in the afternoon, and then right about here is when we're starting to see the thunderstorms break out. So this is Friday in the evening. So we see this corridor here. Now, this is the GFS model. It's just one opinion, and it's what we call a deterministic model. So it's one run. It's not this ensemble that I show a lot, just because it's easier to show the product here. But this is going to be a severe thunderstorm line here. But we'll probably have some arguing points about where it's going to be intense. For instance, down here, it could be. So for severe weather, you always need a good combination of wind shear and moisture, which equates to instability, basically. So this area up here would be moisture starved, but dynamically very good, meaning the winds would be there, but the moisture may not. And the opposite might be true down to the south, although I have a feeling that this is going to be a pretty widespread severe weather system. And a lot of times you might hear out there in the internet something called the term bimodal severe weather. All that really means is that a lot of times you get two concentrations of severe weather. One occurs near and ahead of the surface low, and another one occurs down here where the better instability is. And that very well may be the case with this system. So finally, we'll just keep moving. I should mention again, the snows are continuing there through the Dakotas, and as this low develops and deepens up around Duluth, and through Minneapolis, that area continues to be a kind of a late season snowstorm up there. And then this whole thing arcs, and then we repeat the whole thing on Saturday, possibly for severe weather. You'll notice some thunderstorms breaking out down here, and we had that risk area I showed you a couple of frames ago. So that kind of sums up the week. And of course, if we go too much into the future, it gets into fantasy land. But it looks like another deep storm off the coast of Washington. This is in about a week or so, but we'll worry about that one in future videos. Well, if I can break this down by risk area, and this kind of goes back to that graphic in the thumbnail. So the heavy rain, we already talked about that. That's March 19th through the 20th. As that system begins to wrap up, there's a slight risk of a heavy snow area through much of the inner central Rockies into the northern plains. That's through the 14th and the 15th. That's Saturday and Sunday. And a little bit of heavy rain around the 18th. Coming back into the southern part of California and Arizona, which is good news for them. Here's another thing. Now, a lot of times when these deep cyclogenesis areas develop, you get a very strong wind pattern, and it's been dry. The drought index is pretty high through this part of the world, parts of Texas, New Mexico. So there's a wildfire risk. I haven't shown this graphic since I started doing these videos, but it extends through parts of New Mexico and Texas on the 13th. Expands greatly when that cyclogenesis, that low, really starts to develop on the 14th through much of Texas and Oklahoma. A lot of blowing dust likely there. I live here, and it's quite possible we could see some of that blowing dust coming to southwest Missouri. And then it shrinks a little bit on the 15th, which is Saturday, but still a wildfire risk out there. And we have these heavy snow areas too. Now, this is going out further into the future, into early next week. So it is definitely a pattern of all kinds. Just pick your weather, and we can probably find it here over the next 7 days. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.